the administration is reportedly looking, for example, at rewriting decades-old agreements about water sharing in the Great Lakes, which we share with them. A lot of people say water is going to be the new war between states, and we happen to have a lot of it in Canada.
I agree, and the isolationism that seems so in vogue is going to come at, over time, enormous cost to America. The world has changed profoundly since the last episode of US isolationism. The way the global economy now operates means that you just can't retreat to within your own borders. And the vacuum that is being created in international affairs by the withdrawal of USAID funding, the reduced US global military ambition beyond their efforts to contain China. All of that will be taken advantage of by Russia, China, and others who will seek to recast a global order in a way that is more beneficial to them and therefore at the expense of the US interest. I guess as much as people like me are gravely concerned around what US isolationism does for a new world order, it's worth qualifying to you as a Canadian that isolationism is not entirely isolated within the borders of the United States, and that the United States' near neighbours, particularly Mexico and Canada, are enjoying a very different relationship with Washington at the moment. What is Mark Carney, newly appointed, I think full of confidence and seeing an uptick in his popularity as a consequence of the way that he's approached this. What of US-Canada relations? I mean, how sour can this all turn?
Yeah, great question. Well, if I could start very quickly with a zooming out kind of answer to that, I think where things are heading right now is we seem to be speaking of a very transactional Mr. Trump to a kind of state of the world where things are going to be divided hemispherically. Mr. Trump focusing on North America mostly, giving free rein, and it seems we're headed that way, to Mr. Putin to have sway over this part of the world, and then Xi Jinping in China. I hope to go to Taiwan soon and take a kind of a reading there of how folks feel, but I bet they feel very anxious like people in Ukraine do, because there's growing doubts as to whether Mr. Trump will honor US commitments to defend Taiwan should Xi Jinping make his move. But as for Canada, look, before relocating here, I was based on Vancouver Island. I lived in a border town where we had a US Customs and Immigration post. We had twice-a-day ferries to the United States. And when COVID-19 came, it just severed that direct human contact we had with our American friends. We relied so much on Americans coming and staying with us and spending and so on. Very, very intertwined. I woke up every morning seeing in the distance Mount Washington and a reminder of how close we are. And, for the most part, in big kind of tragedies like COVID-19 pandemic, Canada worked in lockstep with the United States because we knew we were so interconnected. Man-made borders, as you well know, don't stop viruses and things like that. But who would have thought that we'd be at the day where many Canadians are looking at the United States as a predator, as almost an enemy, when you have more than once Mr. Trump calling the former Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, the governor, calling Canada the 51st state. It goes beyond that. Many people may not know this, but the administration is reportedly looking, for example, at rewriting decades-old agreements about water sharing in the Great Lakes, which we share with them. A lot of people say water is going to be the new war between states, and we happen to have a lot of it in Canada. The United States depends very, very heavily on oil from our biggest oil-producing province of Alberta. If that were to suddenly stop, and the Premier there has brought up that possibility, gas prices will go through the roof in the United States. And there's a feeling in Canada right now where, sadly, and we all have very, very strong ties, especially human ties with the United States, that the only way the Trump administration is going to get the message is by inflicting pain on them already many premiers have taken matters into their own hands and done everything from clear the liquor shelves of U.S. booze to Doug Ford in Ontario threatening to slap tariffs on electricity exports or cutting it off altogether, putting millions of Americans potentially, if not in the darkness, with higher utility bills. But already this is having an effect on Americans, and I think we're going to be headed to a point in the not too distant future where Mr. Trump and his MAGA team is going to face a very big backlash. For Mr. Carney, who we should remind people, he was sworn in as Prime Minister. He's not elected. He's kind of an interim Prime Minister, expected to call an election this weekend, which will take place in April. But yeah, Mr. Trump's digs at Canada and at the former Prime Minister have given the ruling Liberal Party, of which Mr. Carney is part of, a huge lift. They were very, very much down in the polls. We're now seeing that a lot of that had to do with Mr. Trudeau, not necessarily with the party. But it now looks like they could squeak through with at least a minority government. And we are looking, most Canadians feel we are looking at a scenario where we will be in this for the long term, as long as Mr. Trump is in power, because many of us feel there's no one going back on what you just did, especially with tariffs and sinking our Canadian dollar, that Mr. Carney appears best equipped as a former central banker, especially, to deal with this very predatory administration. But once again, a lot of us feel that we have to fight this. It's caused, finally, and good things come out of this too, it has forced Canada to redirect its kind of economic access from north-south to east-west. And the Canadian opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, came up with a very good idea a few days ago. He said, let's help Europe defund the Putin war machine. How do we do that? We rush building of LNG terminals on Canada's east coast to make it easier to ship out our energy to Europe so that they can lessen their reliance on Russian energy. So these types of things are being looked at as well, and it's about time.
Well, I agree. And Canada is a sovereign nation, a G7 nation in its own right, and has every right to chart its own course. And I think that what the Canadian government, the EU Commission, and others who are faced with these tariffs are doing in saying, well, we will respond in kind and impose equal pain on the US economy as you impose on ours, is the only way to stand up to Trump's approach. I suppose my sort of macro concern, therefore, is you can envisage, if it was mooted the other week that Putin should be readmitted to the G7 and it becomes a G8 again, and you end up in a situation where you've got within the G8 somebody with whom a Western ally is at war with, China, who has threatened a trade war on the United States, and the rest of the G7 who are in a de facto trade war with the United States already. And that grouping that has underpinned the global order at the highest level for so long ends up being really fractious and divided, and not therefore in any position to solve the world's problems unless they're all able to meet at these at these summits and deal with issues like climate change or the evolution of AI, whilst pretending that they're not all scrapping with each other over tariffs. That feels fanciful to me. It all feels very dangerous, very combustible. And of course, the person who succeeds is Putin, because his narrative all along has been that there should be a return to a global order in which might is right. And everybody just looks after their naked national interest.
Right, like tantrum diplomacy, as I once wrote in an op-ed for CNN. Even under Trump, we saw a lot of that gunboat tantrum diplomacy, but also the Chinese as well. We have to remember, I remember in summits, for example, in Papua New Guinea, where they tried to really strong-arm their way to get statements aligned with their thinking. I think a lot of these summits have become almost anachronisms, because the only way, it seems to me, that they can get any sort of statement together through the work of their Sherpas is to water things down where they have very little meaning. And again, going back to the United States, when in that recent UN resolution and in the Security Council on the third anniversary of the war in Ukraine, where you had the United States watering resolutions down, voting with thug regimes. This is a day we thought that would never come. What the heck is going on there? And I guess it requires other friends of democracy, if we can put it that way, to pick up the mantle and be the shining beacon of democracy, the kind of leader of the free world. I don't know if that can be France under Macron or UK under Sir Keir Starmer, but we need, I think, as a global community, a strong, strong leader to look up to and to defend our values, and of course, to push back what seems like a growing community of thugs. I think I saw a survey the other day where the number of states that are categorized as autocratic have overtaken the number that are seen as non-autocratic. I mean, what a world we live in at the moment, and it almost seems as if Mr. Trump is enabling this process. This is a man, for example, his subservience to Mr. Putin has no floor. He looks up at strong dictators. And if I may, James, I think we've seen that a little bit in these televised Oval Office meetings, this kind of governing by press conference. I was watching carefully when King Abdullah of Jordan was sitting there taking it from Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump saying, yeah, these millions of Gazans can go to Jordan or Egypt. We can turn the Gaza Strip into a Riviera. Those are all red lines for the King of Jordan. He has said very, very clearly, no way to massive displacement of Palestinians. And he just said enough to get by without provoking Mr. Trump, because he well knew that this would go over like a lead balloon, not only in his own country, but the Arab world. We also saw how your Prime Minister handled Mr. Trump by buttering him up. I know I've said this a number of times, people are probably getting bored of this, but I said he buttered him up so much that Mr. Trump's cholesterol level probably went through the roof. But that was brilliant, coming with an invitation from the king. But I think that was diluted a bit by then Mr. Zelensky seeing the king. Mr. Carney has already had an audience with him. Let's see what happens. We have to, of course, hope for the best, but sadly, sitting here in a place like Moldova, everyone feels they also have to prepare for the worst.
Michael, that's a great point to leave our conversation, albeit a sobering one. Thank you so much for joining me on Superpowers. It's been incredible to get your insight on everything from the Ukrainian democratic machinery all the way through to the future of the global world order. I'm James Heapy. This is Superpowers, the future of global security here on Times Radio. If you've liked what you've heard today, then subscribe to the Times Radio YouTube channel for more of Superpowers, but also more of the fantastic geopolitical analysis produced across the Times Radio channel. Until next week, thank you, goodbye.